My name is the Reverend Barbara Doyle. I serve at Shady Grove United Methodist Church in Abingdon and Meadowview United Methodist Church in Meadowview, Virginia. My call story is unique in that it's mine, but I had never in all my life wanted to be a pastor or preacher or anything to do in that capacity in the church. I've always been in the church. I was born and raised in the Baptist church, but I never had any inclination toward pastoring or preaching. My sister and I both preach, and we've often joked that when we were growing up, we didn't even play church where we had to be a pastor in the congregation. So it was kind of a surprise to me. I was at noonday prayer once Wednesday, and I'll never forget this, with my friends at a Pentecostal church, and we were praying, and everybody around me was praying, and I was down on my knees at the altar, and I heard it audibly where God said, "Go feed my sheep." And I thought he meant, go work in a soup kitchen. So I got up and said, I didn't tell anybody. I went to call and said, "Could I work at your food pantry?" And they said, "No, we had enough people." I said, "Well, Lord, why you tell me to go work there, And so I went on, and I kept asking some of my clergy friends, "Do you think God called me to preach?" They said, "Well, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And so one fall, the church, the Pentecostal church in the community, the other Pentecostal church, I hung out at Pentecostals a lot, we're having a community-wide revival, and they had invited this preacher from Florida to come preach. No one had ever seen the man or knew the man, and I was at the revival that night, and he said, "Lady in the green dress," and I looked around, and I was the only person in there that had on a green dress. And he said, "Come forward." He said, "God said, yes, you're supposed to be preaching." And that was confirmation from him, because I knew the man didn't know me, and I certainly didn't know him. And I thought that God must have sent him to tell me that. And so I contacted a friend of mine, Reverend Dunsmore, and asked her would she help me get into the ministry, and she did, and here I am. I love being a pastor. I love preaching. When I was in seminary, my preaching professor said, "You are a great preacher. One day you're going to be a greater preacher." I'm like, "Yeah, right, sure." And so, I went on, but, I love preaching. I just love being a part of God's messenger, being a God's messenger and telling the world about Jesus. And so that's my calling, to be a pastor and a preacher. Pursue it wholeheartedly. If God is calling you, even if you have to ask a preacher from Florida, if you should be preaching, absolutely pursue it and do what you need to do what God has called you to do.